Okay, I think we'll get started with the housekeeping stuff. Just, I know there's people still joining us, but it's 2:02 and we want to make sure that we respect everybody's time. Welcome, everybody. Just a few housekeeping things before we start the actual session and I introduce our two speakers. In the Skype environment, everybody who comes in is by default muted. So if you wish to speak or say something in the session, ask a question, whatever, and you want to say it out loud, you need to unmute yourself by clicking on, there's a little blue icon of a microphone at the bottom of your screen. You click on that to unmute yourself and to mute yourself again. But we do ask that during the session, unless you're asking a question or making a comment or whatever, to please keep yourself muted. For those coming in by phone, if you don't have a mute button on your phone, you can actually mute yourself with *6, and to unmute yourself is just *6 again. But we don't seem to have any issue right now anyway, so that should be okay. There is a chat box at the lower left of your screen. There's looks like a little balloon, text balloon image. If you click on that, that'll open the chat to the side. So if you want to ask a question via chat instead of actually asking it verbally, you can. I'll be monitoring the chat, and also as will be our presenters, to see if there's any questions or whatever in there. Otherwise, if you have any questions, you can ask by chat or open up the text. The PDF of the presentation was sent out in advance to everybody via the Skype invitation. So if there's a problem in the slides somehow, sometimes we have the slides, they don't move even though they look like they're moving to the presenter. You can also still follow along in the PDF. Without further ado, then, I will introduce our two speakers for today, who are presenting in the Research Bootcamp, basically to give us some tips and tricks for having instructional sessions with our user groups. Lindsay McNiff is the Learning and Instruction Librarian at DAL, as is Melissa Helwig, who will also be, she's actually the Information Services Librarian at DAL, and they'll both be presenting today. So I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay and Melissa to take it away.
Thank you, Cynthia. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay McNiff. I'm going to just say a visual hello with my video. I can do that quickly. Hi, I'm Lindsay McNiff, based out of the Kellogg Library at DAL. And I do a lot of instruction-related things, which is how I came to coordinate the Research Bootcamp most recently. We'll talk about that a lot more later on, but I'm based out of the Kellogg, and I'm here in the room with Melissa Helwig, who I'll pass it over to.
Hi, folks. I'm Melissa Helwig. I'm based out of the Kellogg Health Sciences Library here at Dalhousie University. Hopefully my video wasn't too delayed. There we go.
Okay, and that's the last you'll see of us physically. So hopefully that was enough. Okay, so again, we're here to talk about the Research Bootcamp, which is a series of workshops that we've created over the last 4 years. Well, this year, beginning in May, is our 4th year, but we have done it 3 years in a row. And it has been comparatively successful. So comparatively to what we've heard from other institutions, what we've experienced in our own careers in trying to create workshops that students actually attend. This one has been successful for the most part. We'll talk about it. But I should also mention that this workshop is actually a reprisal of a workshop I did at OLA, or not a workshop, I guess, a presentation I did at OLA this past year in Toronto. And when it was my time to fly to Toronto, I was faced with something like this, and hopefully everybody can actually see the slides advancing. You should see my screenshots of what I saw in the morning that I was supposed to fly to Toronto to give my presentation. And during my presentation time slot, I was at home in Halifax, just trying to stay warm. So we had some weather that day. My presentation was rescheduled, but not many people were able to make the rescheduled time. So the reason that we're actually giving this presentation again today through CAUL is somebody, I don't know who, had planned to attend it at OLA and had suggested it as possibly a CAUL presentation that could happen. So Melissa was going to be my co-presenter at OLA along with Ann Barrett, and we'll be talking more about Ann's role later. But Melissa and I are able to present for you today. So here's the outline. We'll talk about the Research Bootcamp and how it came to be. We'll go through some of the topics that we teach in the Research Bootcamp, some of the logistics, also promotion. There were a lot of requests in the feedback that we got from you, the pre-session feedback, that you'd like to know more about how we promoted the series. So we do have some information about that, how we gather feedback, the student response, so what they had to say, how often they attended, etc. And just some thoughts on why we think what we did worked.
So Melissa here. Just to give you a little context, here at Dalhousie University, in the library system, we have 5 libraries, so 4 are located in Halifax, 1 is in Truro, and we have a satellite medicine campus in St. John, New Brunswick. So throughout developing Research Bootcamp, often logistics came in to try and reach our users in these various campuses, and although the first year we mainly focused on campus, we'll talk about that, over time we evolved it into including all of our campuses, and we'll discuss and touch on some of the strategies we went through to incorporate and include everybody that we could. Okay. Research Bootcamp, as Lindsay mentioned, this actually started in 2015 and has evolved over time. We don't know when it'll end. So far we've done it 3 years and we're going on our 4th year this year, and so we'll see where it's going to take us in the future. This is on the right-hand side, you will see one of our advertisement slides. I can see outside of my office one of these hanging up for this year, ready to go. So lots of fun over the time. Lindsay, it's you.
So this
Hi, Lindsay, we're not hearing you. I'm not sure if you're muted or not.
Yeah, sorry about that. I need to remember to turn my mic on every time I speak. Thank you. Right, so the picture that you see here might be representative to some of you of what you've experienced when you so enthusiastically put together a series of workshops and target them at a specific group, whether it be first-year students or graduate students or students in a particular program, and you do all this work and you promote the series, and then this is what the classroom looks like on the first day and the second day and the third day. So and we've experienced this here. We've over the years tried things like drop-in ref work sessions or just drop-in research sessions. We have had a few more successful endeavors, like David Michaels at the Law Library has a very targeted audience with law students. So he has had some success creating optional sessions for them to attend. But for the most part, what we found is that if you don't have some sort of incentive, whether that incentive is the students have to go to class, so they're going to come to class to listen to you, or whether the incentive goes even further, like they get participation marks for attending, or there's an assignment attached to it that you might mark, something like that. It's just been shown time and time again that students really need to have an incentive to attend these sessions, and very often that incentive is not there in these optional sessions, and we end up with empty classrooms. Yes. So how we got here, this is sort of the origin story. As Melissa mentioned, it began in 2015, and the idea actually came through Ann Barrett. So Ann Barrett is the head of Kellogg. She was to be one of the co-presenters on this series at this session at OLA. And Ann was very supportive of the idea that we can make it work, even though it hasn't worked in the past. We should be able to do something to make it work. And the next slide, Melissa. The real sort of incentive for this was what she had seen being done at St. FX. So hello to any St. FX librarians that are on the line today. Specifically Suzanne, who had coordinated a research boot camp event for graduate students at St. FX, and it went over a couple of days. And there was, I talked to Suzanne after. They had a really great uptake. They had some pizza involved at the end, and it was very very well attended and well received. So that's where the initial idea came from. Can you click next? So what we did at that point was have an initial meeting of interested DAL librarians. So there's some of us that are very invested in instruction, and so we got together and had a discussion about what the boot camp as such might look like at our institution. And what we realized pretty quickly is that we differ in a lot of ways on what we see as core research. At first was maybe we can pack all this into one day, and that way we won't lose participants. We can have a single day or maybe 2 days of a boot camp, and the students can register and they'll stay with it through the entire time. We won't have any issues with them falling off. But it quickly became apparent that with an institution of our size and with all the different programs that we have and the different needs, it just wasn't going to work that way. So we decided that we were going to target research assistants and teaching assistants in the summer, which was following the model that St. FX had done. But we also wanted to make sure that was something that we could do to reach more students, which necessitated having the boot camp go over a couple of weeks. So although we do use the word boot camp, it's kind of like, I don't even know what an analogy would be, but less like a week camp and more like a month camp, I guess you would say. So it's a longer camp. Anyway.
And so Lindsay, there we go. So Lindsay, one of the things in thinking about this also was there was St. FX, and then when we had that initial meeting, we realized David Michaels at the law library had been doing kind of a mini one-day boot camp with the law students. And there was a little enticement in his program in that generally the faculty members would say, you have to attend this. So their research assistants and summer students, had that type of incentive. So, yeah.
Exactly, and that's sort of where the idea came from, that actually with these research assistants and teaching assistants, not only are they students, but they also have jobs and they have supervisors in those jobs. So maybe it's a situation where we need to target the supervisors and talk about what we could give them at the research boot camp could actually improve the work that they do over the summer.
You're muted, Lindsay. We're not hearing you.
Oh, yeah, sorry, it's Melissa. I forgot to unmute. Sorry about that. So going back to what Lindsay was saying about where our core skills, our subject searching and information management skills, in thinking about DAL libraries, we have a number of libraries. So we do have a law library, we have a health sciences library, an engineering library, and then the arts and humanities library. So when we came together and started doing this initial planning, we tried to look for similarities that would benefit all of our users. So those ended up being our core skill sessions. So what do all of our students, what do all of the attendees need as some core skills? And then we had some subject specific searching type sessions, and those kind of turned out pretty interesting, as you will see. So things like the legal one, for us in medicine and health sciences, we actually do get a number of kind of legal questions, and likewise the law libraries often have a need for their students to have some health sciences searching skills or information use skills. And so we started looking at those types of cross connections across campus for the core skills. And then even in the subject searching, some of those are designed not only for our own health sciences users, but also that others in other areas could attend. And finally, information management skills. So you'll see those are some of like the core, some core sessions on how do you manage research and research data and those types of things. So for us, it worked out, and it was a really interesting conversation to have with our peers across campus about what we see as core versus subject specific and then information management. And I think those are often, when we were planning this and discussing what we might share with the group, I'm looking at Lindsay now, we talked about this a number of times about this conversation just was so valuable to have, and it might look different at every university. So I would highly recommend, if you're going to offer a program like this, to spend some time talking with your colleagues and even faculty members about what is core for their research assistants to be able to do versus what might be more subject specific, or what other subjects might want to be able to use that knowledge. So it's just something to consider. Next up, what we teach. So in our 2017 offerings, each year the offerings have changed slightly, but I think our core skills have stayed pretty close with a few exceptions. So our Getting Started session, I believe Lindsay is probably still off the instructor for that one. It has, some basic navigating the catalog, doing some basic searches, getting some information set up, literature review searching. That's kind of our literature review session, and it's not so much that we focus on the nuts and bolts of searching every database, but more when you do a literature review, what are some best practices for doing a literature review? How do you record and report that so that you don't have to start again each time? The RefWorks session, sometimes this has just been a citation management session. Sometimes it's more RefWorks focused. So thinking about everybody, all the research assistants will have to deal with citations for projects and working with professors. And then the Right Stuff, if anybody wants to take a guess and type in the chat box what they think the Right Stuff one might be about, I'll come back to that after I talk about the two that have a for participating. So the Right Stuff is about copyright and often talks a bit about kind of that publishing repository type information. So the next two, we have the star next to the literature review writing and the abstracts and grants. Those are presented by our writing center staff. We have started including them in the second year. So the first year we tried to keep our offerings as basic as we could. Not basic, but we tried to keep it fairly manageable so it didn't explode overnight that we had 40 sessions and trying to manage it all. We started, we tried to start small. And then the second year, somebody suggested, let's get the Writing Center involved. And you know what? It was a great partnership. I was the one that was the first year that headed Research Bootcamp the year that they came in, and I had really great chats with them about we want it to be really hands-on, really interactive. We want them to be able to leave the session having a sense of what is the best practice that they might put into writing an abstract for a conference or for a paper. And some great tips for writing grants, because we knew from talking to faculty. So as a liaison librarian, I talked with my faculty, and I also looked at my reference interactions the previous year. So when I was talking to research assistants, what were they asking me over and over again? What type of questions were they asking me? And what did they want to know? And often the abstracts and grants, and then actually writing up the literature review, this came up over and over again. And I actually attended the sessions, and even though I'm somebody that has written abstracts and grants in the past, I still found their session quite valuable. So, yeah. There we go. 1, 2, 3. 3 core sessions. So we actually paired the getting started and the literature review session together into one morning, and then the literature review writing and citation management session together, and finally the abstract one. Oh, there we go. Okay.
I took over as presenter and I just went.
Yeah, so sorry, I'll let you scroll through. No problem.
No, that
Lindsay
set the there you go, you're back.
Okay. So here's what happened. I took over as presenter and it went right back to the beginning. So I won't do that again.
You're in charge now.
Okay, so what you'll see here on this slide is our muffin disclaimer. And I introduced a muffin disclaimer into this presentation because the way that this was billed at OLA was the subtitle was Research Bootcamp, or How We Packed the House Without Pizza or Participation Points. So getting at that idea that we found a way to do it without food or participation points, but then I had to admit that we did have muffins, haha. So, but the muffins were not advertised. So the students weren't coming for the muffins, although they may have come back on the second and third day for the muffins, because each of these core skills sessions that are listed here had a muffin break. So each of these sessions, I don't think, Melissa, you mentioned how long they were, but they totaled, core 1, 2, and 3 totaled 3 hours apiece. So they were quite long. So that was 3 hours for the 2 sessions. And so in between that, we gave them muffins, and we felt pretty good about that. So in terms of our subject searching sessions, we've got, we covered quite a wide range of subject searching. We had our data librarian give a session on data and statistics. We had our legal librarians go into detail in a session that was geared toward non-law students because they already do a research boot camp for law students. So this one was geared towards other students that wanted to learn about how to find legal resources. We had engineering, humanities, a couple of health sciences sessions. So there was PubMed and then not PubMed, which was previously called Beyond PubMed. Basically getting at the databases that aren't PubMed related to the health sciences, like CINAHL and Embase and all those.
And so for that distinction, we found a number of other groups wanted some core skills on using PubMed, but then they didn't necessarily need some of the other databases, so it was a nice ability to split those up in that type of way. So I'll let you.
Then we had the information management. So we considered anything to be information management if it had to do with how you manage or present your information. So the ones that fell into this category last year was 3 Excel sessions that we gave. We have a data librarian here named Julie Marcoux, who is an Excel wizard. So she was able to present all of these sessions. We had a session on research data management, session on how to create conference posters using PowerPoint, and a session on evidence synthesis.
And Lindsay, I just have to give a shout out for you and that conference presentation poster, because that one I have had a number of faculty members over the course of time that have now had research assistants attend your conference poster session, and I have witnessed an improvement in the conference posters since that session came to be. And I think you originally developed it for the SIM students here at Dell, correct?
Yeah, I did actually originally develop for the SIM students, and you'll see a SIM student in the chat, Allie, mentioning that it's a good session. So, hey, it's a good session. I feel at this point I give sessions on conference posters more than I make conference posters. Anyway, okay, so those are the sessions. That's just an overview for you. So now just getting into some of the logistics. Melissa?
So the logistics of it, as we have mentioned, being across campus, we all have different schedules. Oh, so we've had a question, what's the evidence syntheses? Do you want me just to carry on. So evidence syntheses is generally, you will often hear it referred to in health sciences as systematic reviews, scoping reviews. They're a type of review paper that generally can involve some sort of incorporation of statistics or not, and generally you take a very specific clinical question like what statin is best at preventing reoccurring MIs, so myocardial infarctions. So it's that, but the problem, not really a problem, is it's big business for health sciences librarians, but it's becoming a trend in other areas. So we've seen a trend in environmental sciences starting to do evidence synthesis projects, so taking the best evidence and then combining it into a research project. They're really quite interesting. Law it's starting to maybe show up in law, and definitely agriculture. So other groups across campus and just in the research community are getting involved. Sorry, I could talk at length about that. So back to the logistics. When do we offer these sessions? So having a number of groups across campus, generally general arts and humanities, universities or academic programs generally run that September until the end of April. Or check the chat button to see if there's a thumbs up for that. Generally, sessions and classes run on that schedule. Here we have groups like medicine that they don't actually finish exams till the end of May, and some actually write exams in August. So we run on a very different schedule. So part of that initial meeting was trying to find some common ground, and it tended to be May, June tended to be common ground when across campus research assistants were hired, and that's where we saw some spikes across campus in research assistants starting to look for help. So we generally have all our core sessions offered in the first week, and then the other sessions are offered kind of sporadically, but more kind of in a staggered fashion. To allow time for students, the attendees, to go back, apply some of their new knowledge, and then come back and learn a bit more. During my time, when I took over in second year, I started looking at video conferencing options for the distributed classes with the facilitators on site in Halifax. And so that started in 2016. We were very lucky here on campus to have accessibility. Getting a new version of BB Learn Collaborate, which is part of our learning management system here on campus. And the old version, I won't lie, it was clunky. Every time I watched a student having to navigate it, it was pretty brutal. But the new BB Collaborate that they launched in 2016 was super slick, super nice to use, and I'm really thankful to David Michaels, who was keen to be our first presenter using BB Collaborate. And then we've gone on, as Lindsay will tell you in a moment, to use it in other sessions the following year when she took over. So more logistics. Registration, so initially registration was available by email, so it involved emailing a support person who then processed, looked at numbers, who was attending, would send reminders, anything that needed to go out, evaluation forms, those types of things. To 2016, I used Google Forms to facilitate sign up, and then Lindsay took it to the next step, and we used Eventbrite in 2017. Other libraries I've noticed across the country will sometimes have the plug-in from SpringShare, so the LibGuide people, and use like sign-up tools through there. So there are a number of different options. I think Eventbrite has been the most successful so far. I've got a little head nod from Lindsay. And then 2017 sign-in sheets were used. So initially sign-in sheets were used just for the core sessions, and then they started being used for more across campus. And we also have, I think that's on our evaluation slide about the different types of evaluation forms we've used. Our approach overall, like I said when I talked about the Writing Center sessions, the approach that we tried to instill with all of our instructors, the people that would be, is that there should be lots of activities, time for discussion, and really our main focus was for them to leave with applied skills. So we focused on making sure they addressed the skills and activities that students would need for the departments or faculties they were going to work on with this summer. And we base this on our previous knowledge when we had those core librarian meetings and planning meetings for this. Okay.
Just one other thing to mention as well, actually, about these sign-in sheets is that as we used sign-in sheets for all of the sessions, they really seemed to make the students feel like there was another layer of proof that they had attended, if you will, I guess. That seemed to be that the students were very intent on signing the sheet. If they showed up for the session, they wanted to sign the sheet. So it almost became like the sign-up sheet was something that they saw as providing value if maybe their supervisor got in touch with us to make sure that they had attended or something like that. So there may be more to those sign-in sheets than we realize. And they also helped us keep track of how many attended. Okay, so this slide here shows some of the ways that we marketed to faculty. So the poster that you see there on the left, it was created by Marlo McKay, our communications coordinator. And can everyone see that slide? The marketing to faculty slide? Yes, okay. I think it might just be on yours, Melissa. We were worried there was a delay. Okay, so there's the poster there, which Marlo McKay, our communications coordinator, put together, and it has all the necessary information on it, when to sign up, what type of sessions are being offered, etc. And those went up in all of the libraries. We also brought some down to the Center for Learning and Teaching. We also had liaison librarians. Dal uses the liaison model, so there's a librarian working with each department. The liaison librarians sent out an email to their departments. I'm going to flip ahead a slide here because this email is an example, and this is actually not on the slide deck. Send out an updated slide deck if people would like. I added this morning because I thought you might like to see the type of email that we would send. So I won't read the whole thing, but some of the language in it that is maybe valuable is in the first paragraph. If you know of someone who could benefit from developing effective and efficient information management techniques and literature search skills, etc. Down at the bottom it says faculty can recommend the workshops to their RAs or TAs or register on their behalf, so that's allowed. So we really wanted to set up this idea that the workshop is for the students, but it's also so that the students can do better work for their faculty members. So I'll go back here. So we had the liaison librarians, the posters. We also worked with departmental admins, and this was Marlo's idea. So what Marlo did is she had the posters printed, and they were nice. They were on nice paper. They weren't on printer paper. She physically sent a poster to the admin person from each department, and she also sent an email to them for them to forward. So in that sense, the admins were getting, we're hearing from the communications coordinator and possibly also the liaison librarian. And in that way, the admin coordinator could do something like maybe add it to a newsletter or just mention it to students, certainly put the poster up in their department. We did a lot of social media promotion, but that was all done through Marlo McKay, again, the communications coordinator. So lots of tweeting and retweeting and tagging and, you know, all the stuff. Also on Facebook. She also runs the blog, so she did up a blog post for us. The Center for Learning and Teaching employs a lot of TAs here, so we made sure to communicate with them through email and also via poster. And we also created sort of a landing page website for the boot camp. And on that site were pieces of information about how to register, frequently asked questions, things about the sessions themselves, the registration link, etc. That was all created on a LibGuide so that we could easily manage it, because LibGuides are so much easier to manage than the university website. Okay. I'll just skip past that. So because I just talked about promotion, and that was promotion that was done this year, by the way, that's why I'm speaking to it. I do run a survey now at the end of each boot camp just to ask anybody that will respond a few basic questions. And one of the questions I ask is, how did you hear about the research boot camp? Just because I would like to get a sense of what actually worked in terms of the promotion. And as you can see from this chart, the majority of them did hear about it from a supervisor or professor. So however the professors were hearing about it, maybe through a liaison librarian, maybe through a poster. Also the, where was that now? The poster advertisement seemed to actually be quite successful. This year we also have somebody in our library who's quite a good artist, so he did a whiteboard to advertise for it in the Killam Library as well. Those that answered other included things like, well, I heard about it through email in general, I heard about it through an administrative email, Faculty of Grad Studies email, or direct from a librarian. So it looks like our promotional strategies were working fairly well. So this here is an example of the feedback form that we use for each session. So we use paper forms because we tried using online forms one year, but the problem with that is that students will leave the room and not fill it out. So if you bring them paper copies, they will actually fill it out in class for the most part. The exception with this is if we had sessions that are online, and we do have a few that are entirely through Collaborate, they're not able to fill out paper forms in that case, obviously, so we email them the forms. But we ask things like, how much of the material presented was new to you? I already knew the part about this. We ask them to list a few things that they learned, and then we ask them to rate a few things, like how clear was the session, how was the pace of the session, how did you find the amount of information presented. We just to see if they have any additional comments. And then we also ask them, this is sort of the more outcomes-based question. We ask them at the end of this session, I feel better prepared to conduct research. Or if it was a session from the Writing Center, we would ask, after this session, I feel better prepared to write a literature review or something like that. So that's where we can kind of get at whether the session achieved its goals. We also asked them if they'd ever attended a library session before, just to see what kind of new students we're reaching out to with this. All right, so feedback. So this is our nice slide of our registration in 2017, and you might look at this and think, wow, that's so exciting. You have 87 people registered for one of your sessions. The lowest registration we had was 18, which was engineering, so it was quite high, and we were really, really impressed. But we knew from previous years that we needed to look upon this with a bit of skepticism, because we had had previous years with very high registration and lower and lower turnout. So, and just to remind you, those three core skills sessions were around writing abstracts and grants, copyright, writing the lit review, RefWorks, and getting started. So this is our slide on registration versus reality. So it's lower, obviously less people came, but I still feel quite encouraged by those numbers, particularly if you look at gray literature. So although we had 64 signed up and 15 came, Gray Literature was the last session offered in the boot camp, so it happened in mid-June last year, and we still got 15 people coming to it, which is more than I would have expected years ago trying out something like this. We ended up with about between 40 and 50 students coming to the core skills sessions, and then other than that it was between, I guess 6 for the engineering was the lowest. It was between 6 and about 30-ish.
Core skills 2, what happened?
Oh yes, in core skills 2 I lost the sign-in sheet. So this was based on the registration numbers and the sign-in sheet. Make sure to hold on to those sign-in sheets or you don't have any data. So my guess, based on how full the room was, would be that it was between 40 and 50 students. Okay, so there's a question here. Did I send reminder emails a day or two before the sessions? Yes, I did. And I made sure that those reminder emails always came from me specifically. And I felt that that helped in developing a bit of a rapport with the students. So those that dropped out of the session last minute would send me an email and say, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot I have an appointment, or what, they would feel like they had some sort of stake in it. And because these emails were always coming from me, and I sent reminders for every single session with all the information that they needed, like whether they needed to arrive early or bring a laptop, that was key, I think, in getting the response that we had.
So I had also sent reminders the year I did it, and I had a support staff person send the reminders with, like, remember, bring a laptop.
We can't hear you, Melissa. Sorry.
There you go. Sorry. I had also had reminder emails go out the year I did it. I headed up Bootcamp, but they came from a support staff member with me copied on it, and had all the same reminders. This is where the room is. Please bring this, or don't bring that, or whatever. And yeah, like Lindsay, I had the same experience where some people would send a reply and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, the lab has this going on. I can no longer attend." But then some people they wouldn't show up regardless. So you never know.
So this slide just gives you a sense of where the people were coming from. So health, by far, it was by far the most popular with the health students. Second was engineering, which is a bit odd because the engineering dedicated session had the fewest students, but obviously the engineering students were finding other sessions that they wanted to attend. So really it was quite across the board. We did have fewer students from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, and that's something that we're sort of continuing to struggle with, to determine what really are sessions that will attract students from those groups. But they really are popular with science, agriculture, engineering, and health students thus far, anyway. Okay, so as you saw on the slides, attendance did wane as the series went on, and that was a trend that has really been consistent over the past 3 years that we've done this boot camp. It's just unfortunately what happens. And in a situation where you don't have participation marks to give to them, there's no real academic incentive in terms of a grade. What we experienced, especially this past year, was actually quite good, I think, in terms of people continuing to show up and to give positive feedback. There was positive feedback that came in almost every day, based on an email from a student just mentioning how much they were enjoying it, or just a comment from a student as they left the room saying, wow, that was really informative. So just lots of really good positive feedback from them. So those feedback forms that they had to fill out at the end of each session, I just have a few charts about some of that feedback. So they were asked how much of the material presented was new, and the majority said somewhat, and the second most said totally. So the benefit of the feedback form that we used is that because each of the instructors who were part of this boot camp will get their feedback forms after, they can actually see how much of the material was repetitious, because the students are asked to comment on what did you already know before coming to this session. So this graph here is for the entire boot camp. It's not for any specific session, but each of the instructors are provided with their own report, like a mini report basically for their session. After this session, I feel better prepared to do whatever. So the answer to this was, or the rest of this question was different depending on the session, but we had agree and strongly agree coming out on top again. Have you ever attended a library instruction session at Dalhousie other than this bootcamp series? So we were really interested in this one because we just wanted to know how many students had never had library instruction before, like who were our new audience, and I mean, it'd be interesting to know why it was they decided to come to this, what was preventing them from having had library instruction in the past. But in fact, the majority, quite a few of them had attended other sessions, but the majority of the respondents had never attended a library instruction session other than the boot camp. So very interesting. So they were also on the exit survey, they were asked to comment on what they wish we had covered. So here's just a few things, and maybe if you're thinking about doing something similar to this, some of these might appeal to you. But they wanted more workshops on open access resources in different disciplines. And I think that referred specifically to the Grey Literature session that we had, and the Grey Literature session focused on open access resources, but it was mainly on health. So maybe having a session on open access in different disciplines. Research processes like interview techniques and research design, that's interesting, and it's something that we've considered offering at the bootcamp and may do at another point. Documenting literature searches. So there was a lot taught in the open access Grey Literature session on how to document Grey Literature searches. So this person was interested in finding out how to document straight up literature searches.
And Lindsay, I always wonder with that documenting literature searches comment, if they didn't attend the core session 2 on the building of the literature session, because that one in the core skills 1, I felt like we covered a bit of it, but could have beefed it up a bit more. So I always wondered about that.
Could be, yeah, definitely. They wanted more Excel, and so when we said to Julie, they want more Excel, she said, they want more Excel? I already do 3 sessions. Let's focus on health research for examples. That sometimes can't be helped because we're coming from our disciplines that we're mired in, but of course we always have to think about other ways to provide examples, and how to publish a scientific article. I'm mindful of the time here, so yeah, Melissa, did you have
I was just going to jump in and say, and it's hard too with the health, with a number of, when you look at the attendees, with so many being from health, even if you use examples, in some of the sessions I've taught with the core skills that are not health examples, chances are 7 of the 10 questions in the session came from health people. So it's always hard to make that balance. But
definitely. So just some of the comments on the survey, I've broken them up here into complementary and constructive. So in terms of complementary, they enjoyed the interactivity, which, as Melissa mentioned, that was something that we were really focused on. We wanted the sessions to be interactive. They found the subject coverage to be good, extremely well organized, and timely and reliable communication. So that gets at those reminder emails that I was always sure to send. Constructive criticism, they did find some sessions had content overlap, and we're trying to encourage away from that just by having, we do have a LibGuide, a private LibGuide that has all of the old PowerPoints from previous years on it. So just encouraging people to have a look at those, just to make sure, even if they're not attending the core skills sessions, just to know what's being taught so that they avoid repeating. They wanted more handouts, more paper handouts. There was a suggestion to record or live stream, and we'll have a bit to say about that on the next slide. Reminding participants to bring laptops. So the first session, I did not remind participants to bring laptops, and I learned from and be more aware of the reality of participation versus registration. So that was a real lesson that we learned. It's very tempting to see these great registration numbers as fully great, and something that's, oh, my audio cut out for the big reveal. Let me see here. Am I back? I'm back? Okay, right. I don't know if this is the big reveal, but we really needed to keep in mind that even though it's really tempting to see high registration numbers as amazing and wonderful, the turnout is never as good as you expect. So we had things happening, like we had a 30-person lab booked for the Excel sessions, and we had a waiting list of like 10 people to get into it. And participants knew that there was a waiting list. I'd been emailing them, but somehow still we only got about half the turnout versus the people that had said that they were going to come. And so students were looking around the classroom and saying, well, there was a waiting list for the session, yet half of the chairs are empty. And so there's this kind of a disconnect there, and it makes them feel a bit like, you know, we don't know what we're doing over here or something, which we do. We try very hard. But that's really important to be mindful of that. So why we think it worked, targeting research assistants and TAs through faculty has been really, really successful. So we do go straight to the faculty, and the posters, of course, will be noticed by students, but we go to the faculty because we see the service that we're providing as something that's going to help their students do better work for them during the summer. And we try to present the skills as directly applicable to their roles as TAs as well.
And Lindsay, I forgot to mention that just more kind of evidence that I actually had a student make an appointment with me in the fall and said, I'm going up for this RA position, and they mentioned that I hadn't attended any of the research bootcamp sessions in my interview, and so she made a personal appointment to get some help with like citation management and a couple other skills that we cover. And I was like, oh wow, that's you know, following through to the fall. So
cool. Yeah, and then there was that personal connection through the emails. Just to bring it back to streaming and recording, we've had a few discussions about that, and I think some of us are very pro streaming and recording, others are a little bit more on the fence. There's an issue with streaming and recording when you're trying to create sessions that are as interactive as possible. Maybe there's less lecturing happening in those sessions, which is difficult if you're recording it and trying to create a useful artifact for people to go back to later. I don't know, I'd be interested in hearing others' thoughts on that. And the other piece is certification. We've had a few students who have been to the boot camp ask, is there certification attached to it? And currently there isn't, but there can be. It would take some work and some logistics, but it could happen.
I think the other issue or question around streaming and recording is, I know the copyright people have definitely said that they don't like their sessions to be recorded, and also just even the privacy because of that interactivity, you know, that hesitation for students to put up their hand if it's going to be something that can go back and be recorded. You know, it comes down to that personal privacy online as well, so lots of things to consider there.
I'm sorry, I didn't unmute yet again. This is just our acknowledgement slide. Wanted to acknowledge Marla McKay, Communications Coordinator, Julie Marcoux, who is our data librarian, the librarians who helped present these sessions and the Writing Center staff, and Suzanne Vanden Heugen for the idea at St. FX. I also just wanted to say that one of the groups that we're partnering with next year, as well as the Atlantic Research Data Center, they actually came to us when they heard about this, and they wanted to do a session, so they're going to do a session on some of the new holdings in the ARDC, which is great. So does anyone have any questions for us? Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. In the 2017, we had mainly, so we had some admin staff who, particularly somebody on the agricultural campus who did admin work in the research office, I believe. So a lot of the sessions were really interesting to her. And then again, we had some library staff. We had people from document delivery attending. I would say most of the staff came from the library, but there are a few in admin. Actually, also some of the hospital folks who have access to DAL resources have attended as well. Any other questions?
And Cynthia,
Yes.
Cynthia, are you available to send out, there was one person that said, I believe it was John, yes, the copy of the email. So Cynthia, are you able to send out to the users, to the attendees, the updated slides?
Yes, I can. If you send them on to me, I can send them on to them.
Perfect.
And I think somebody wanted a copy of the poster as well.
Yes, there was somebody who asked about that.
So I can send that as well, just a PDF of that. We're out of the printed ones. We printed a limited run for this year. But yeah, hopefully you feel like you could maybe attempt something like this at your institutions. Has anyone tried something like this before?
And you can unmute yourself if you want to speak.
Oh, bunch of chats. Thanks very much, Bruce. Amanda. Okay, so workshops on Zotero. Yeah, that would be similar to what we had tried in the past. We had tried drop-in series on RefWorks without much uptake. So something similar to MSVU, not as intensive.
I think the mention of the international students one is quite interesting. I know that's something I've wondered about as well, working with that subpopulation or that subgroup on campus.
I think too, just in terms of final tips, it would be, if you're thinking about doing something like this, it's a good idea to have a core group to structure it around first, but then to have one person doing the coordination. So booking the rooms, planning whatever food you're having, sending out all the communications and things like that. It just makes it to be a tighter and more cohesive event.
Lindsay, I think that's totally, that's exactly it. That initial core group, I think, that met in 2015, it was great that each person was able to go back to their local library and chat amongst the other liaisons and the other people that did instruction and had those real departmental connections to find out things about dates and planning and what the research assistants really needed was really key. And then having the central coordination.
Yeah. Well, good luck, everyone.
Thank you very much, Lindsay and Melissa. This was fantastic.
No problem. Happy to do it.
And just for those who are still on the line, I'll be putting the recording up on the website very soon, and I'll also put the slides up, the slide deck or the PDF version of the slide deck up there as well.